Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. I know this video is coming out a little late, but this is just something that kind of came to my mind that I think is a good thing to talk about, especially in today's film environment, and that is the use of nostalgia in film. And this is going to relate back to some other things that I've said before, but I think I'm treading enough new ground where this video will it will prove that it should exist, and I'm not just repeating myself. Um, but you know, anybody can see we have all the remakes, we have all the belated sequels, we have all this stuff, all these older franchises that are getting the revival treatment nowadays, and especially the '80s franchises, which are all turning, roughly 30 years old. By 2020, they'll all be 30 years old at least. Um, and It's kind of one of those things that you know they've done it before. They did it with the '70s a bit. They've done it with the '60s and the '50s, where they've tried to bring these older films into modern audiences, and in some cases rely on nostalgia. I think more for franchises, they rely a bit more on nostalgia. Stuff like Terminator. You wouldn't be able. You really can't have a Terminator movie without an Arnold reference. Even Salvation had that little section at the end where they show the T-800, which is the young Arnold, which is all CGI at the time because I believe he was governor when that movie was being filmed. But he still had even though it was a minor little blip on the radar, it was basically like a cameo, and he wasn't even there. But it referenced back to him because it's a Terminator movie. You can't have a Terminator movie without Arnold because he's so integral to it. And I think that's why they keep bringing him back, is because of the nostalgia sake. And you can look at other stuff in Terminator Dark Fate too, like bringing back Sarah Connor with Linda Hamilton. Um, and it feels like more and more modern movies are basing themselves on nostalgia as opposed to trying to do right by the characters. It's the idea like, oh, we'll just throw this character in there, and based on nostalgia, people will watch it because they remember this character and they like this character. You can have that with a bunch of different series nowadays that you can touch, and I think it's very very much overused. Now, are there situations where it's warranted? I think yes. You look at a movie like Tron Legacy, where you have Jeff Bridges in there. Obviously, he was the Flynn, and he was the original protagonist of the first Tron movie back in '82, and so he's kind of like the top supporting character in Tron Legacy, basically, because he also has a dual role in that film. But the actual character of Flynn, I think, has a major supporting role in that film. And I think it was good to bring him back, and I think you had to bring him back because that sequel was a number of years. I think at the time it was 30 years after the original movie took place. I believe came out in 2012. I could be wrong about that. It might have been 2010 actually. But you needed to have Jeff Bridges in there to kind of bridge the gap. And I think that was a good use of it because that character was written very well. He was carried over from the original. We got to fill in the blanks for what happened to him in between the original Tron and Tron Legacy. So there wasn't this huge time gap, again, like what they did with Star Wars, where they bring back all the imagery and they basically just make a retread of A New Hope with The Force Awakens, and they add in all the legacy characters except for really Luke Skywalker until the very very end of the film, and they don't do anything with them really. They kill off Han Solo, and that's supposed to be emotional, but really, he's back for the film. We all kind of knew he was going to die, going into it, or somebody was. Princess Leia has kind of a backseat to everything, and Luke Skywalker shows up in the last 5 seconds of the movie. So you really didn't do a whole lot to build on those characters, and there's really not a lot we learn about the years in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. All we know is that Luke started a Jedi Temple. His Padawans were slaughtered by his nephew, and he went into hiding. Now, we don't know anything else about what exactly happened there. We know that Han and Leia, due to the whatever Kylo Ren turning to the dark side, ruined their marriage. They broke up. So we knew we basically know that those things happen. We don't really know what led down those roads. At least we didn't know really until The Last Jedi, and even those explanations were kind of bad. So, we Force Awakens didn't do a lot to bridge the gap between those original films with the characters we did care about, and the characters they introduced were very shallow and two-dimensional. Again, because it's supposed to be a retread, basically, of A New Hope. And again, to quote George Lucas, you didn't do anything new, which is, nothing that is overly surprising for Disney Star Wars. But there are ways to do nostalgia right, and there are ways to do it bad. Tron Legacy was able to do it right. Disney Star Wars was able to do it bad. And I think that ultimately a majority of it comes down to the writing team. If you have, or the writer, period, if it's a single writer. And the thing is, you should have somebody that understands characters, that understands how they worked, that understands how the previous films in that series worked with those characters, and try to play on those ideas. You don't need to cookie cutter the character from the original and just stick it in to the new one, because obviously some time has passed for the most part, so you don't need to have the exact same character. You can change them a bit, but you have to give the connective tissue, otherwise the audience who's coming for the nostalgia is not going to get the nostalgia. Again, I cite this back to Star Wars. We don't really learn, most of what we learn about what happened in between 6 and 7 is basically just, hearsay or insinuation. We don't really learn how the First Order came to be. We don't know what happened to the Empire after the war. We don't know what happened to the Rebellion, what the new Galactic Republic is. We don't learn any of this stuff. And, we only find out after the fact, through, deleted scenes, hey, in Force Awakens, when the Star Killer base, when it blows up all those planets, yeah, one of those was the capital planet of the new republic or whatever it is. So all the members of the government are dead, and they just show this shot of this woman who's I believe a representative from Leia. I think that actually does get mentioned in the movie. And then behind her apparently is the Chancellor of the New Republic, and he just gets blown to bits, and we never get any dialogue with him. We never understand how this government is run, and why is there this tiny little ragtag resistance, and there's no other starships or anything in the galaxy that are fighting the First Order. Why is it just Leia and this ragtag group of rebels? You never understand how we got from point A to point B, and I think that's a big part of doing nostalgia right, is showing how did this character that we loved and we left off in this film, how did they become like this in this film? Whether that's good or bad, we want the connective tissue. We want to know what happened. And I think the only way that you really can do that is, again, through the writing. And I think the writing and the story structure are the most important parts of doing a film like that, because again, if you get it wrong, your whatever you're trying to do is just blew up on the launch pad. Because if you can't rope those original people in, if you can't get those original fans in and get them excited for your product that you're reviving at this point, that product is going to fail, because those are the people that are going to tell their friends, hey, this was awesome, go see this, or they're going to go see it 4, 5, 6 times. Again, like Star Wars fans, I know I keep relating back to that, but it's a prime example of it, Or, a better example is the Star Trek franchise, which has now kind of gone off the rails, where the original reboot film, which is the 2009, just titled Star Trek, I actually enjoyed. I thought it was a good thing. It had a few little callbacks to some stuff from the original series and from the movies. Stuff that we didn't see, stuff that wasn't elaborated on. So I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. It's interesting. I haven't seen this stuff before. I'm a huge original series fan. I haven't seen this stuff before. And I didn't really mind the interpretations of the younger characters, because, again, they're younger. They grow into the characters that we know in the series. So I get that. Then Star Trek Into Darkness happened. And then they just ripped off everything they could from Wrath of Khan and jammed it into the movie. And that's when you nostalgia jumped the shark, or you jumped the shark, period. Because now you have gone from these minute little things of nostalgia to you're just ripping off another movie for your own movie for nostalgia's sake. And again, that is the wrong way to go about it. And again, that's just what alienates fans. That's what alienated me from that franchise. I was full go for Star Trek Into Darkness when it was going to be coming out. I was like, oh, sweet. I've been waiting for this for 4 years. I want to go see this movie. I want to go see it in IMAX. And I sat through the movie, and I'm like, that was a god-awful piece of shit. Who decided this was a good idea? And that's also the time when I realized that J.J. Abrams was a hack story writer. And he basically just rips off either his own work or other people's work, mostly Steven Spielberg, because he doesn't actually know how to write an original plotline anymore. And the original plotlines that he has written are lukewarm at best. You can look back at stuff like Cloverfield. Again, that's just a guy running around with a handy cam for half the movie and a little tiny bit of story mixed in. The main centerpiece of that was them running down the street and then the monster throws the head of the Statue of Liberty and it lands in the road. That was the main marketing tactic for that film. But found footage in general, I think, is a horrible genre for the most part. But regardless of that, just ripping stuff off and putting it in a story doesn't make a good movie. Good writing does. And I think that's something that Hollywood needs to remember when they're trying to bank off of 80s nostalgia, is that you need to do these characters justice, because if you don't, you're not going to get the crowd back that liked those original films. And if you don't get them back, then you're not going to get the new crowd back either. So it's just kind of something that has been kind of bouncing around in my head a little bit. The idea of nostalgia and the idea that they are kind of draining the 80s of all of its, good franchises and, good films, and either remaking them or, making sequels to them. You can look at Blade Runner 2049. You can look at, obviously the newer Star Wars films. They're talking about doing another Indiana Jones. They've already talked about rebooting stuff like Die Hard. There's a whole bunch of stuff on the table with various studios, mostly Disney, but various studios, about reboots and remakes and all this other stuff that, again, is just they're meant to try and get nostalgia based on a franchise name or based on a tag or whatever. They're trying to get people back in the theater, and they don't want to do the work that's involved to make original content. And the problem is that even though they're doing these older franchises, they're not even putting the work into them to make them worthwhile to watch. And that's really the sad part about it, is they're just driving once beloved franchises right into the ground because they refuse to do the work. They refuse to get the writers that know what they're doing. They just hire the big names who basically just retread all their old stuff and write very light screenplays that don't work half the time. People like Alex Kurtzman, people like Robert Orci, people like David Goyer. They write a ton of big movies, but most of them suck. David Goyer is a fucking horrible screenwriter. That can be done up from the Blade films, where Wesley Snipes basically had to ad-lib half of his lines because they were written so terribly. And David Goyer has stated on multiple occasions that he can't even write good dialogue. He said he's just a good story structure person. It's like, the main part of writing a screenplay is dialogue. You want to be able to have good interactions between characters and good scene setup. Yes, story structure is important, but that's why you should be part of a writing team. You shouldn't be solely writing a screenplay. If you're good at story structure, you need a guy that's good at dialogue. That's the point of it. And I know this kind of devolved into a writing argument, but it still does have a lot to do with nostalgia, and it has a lot to do with adaptation, basically. Can you adapt this screenplay to screen, make it work, and make it so that it's a popular film and people want to go see it that liked the films that came before it. So that's just kind of my take on this thing. I want to know what yours is. How do you feel about nostalgia in film? Is it something that still exists for you, or is it all just a cheap cash grab? Put your thoughts in the comments. Again, I like to know what you're thinking. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?